to General Services Public Works Committee. It's August 10th, 2020 at noon, and we have one agenda item, and welcome Chief Lee White here to do the Coeur d'Alene Police Department presentation.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This was kind of left wide open, and so I wasn't quite sure what to put together other than just kind of a broad overview of the police department and kind of what we've been up to over the past 12 months or so. And so I thought we just kind of, I've got about 5 minutes maybe worth of material, and after that, I'd just be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So in general, we have 113 total employees. Our department is split into two divisions. The patrol division is basically everyone who wears a uniform. And then the investigations division also includes our records department and then a whole bunch of other professional staff, including our evidence section and things of that nature. Our sworn supervision is, as you see up there on the screen. Last year we had 42,717 calls for service. That represents a slight decrease in calls for service over the year before. Now remember, we put together a crime reduction strategy back in the end of 2014, the beginning of 2015, and we expected calls for service to increase slightly after the implementation of that program, and as we also expanded our community outreach, because what we thought was people would feel more comfortable calling the police department, and so we could expect an increase, and we saw that over the last several years. We experienced an increase in calls for service, and then last year we experienced our first reduction, which is also to be expected after some period of time. It would usually coincide with some level of drop in calls for service, drop in crimes. And our three main areas of focus are crime reduction, which I'll talk about here briefly, mostly how we go about implementing our crime reduction strategies, development employees, and also providing awesome customer service to our citizens. Some of the things I'd like to highlight here to begin with. Since 2014, crime in our city has dropped 60%, our Part 1 crimes. Part 1 crimes, percentage-wise, of population, are lower than they have ever been. Any records we can find in our police department anywhere, they have never been this low. In addition to that, when I talk with other chiefs of police across the nation or hear from other agencies or read other reports, I can't find another city that's dropped crime 60%, Part 1 crimes in that period of time. It's absolutely fantastic. Recently, there's some major cities who've seen some huge increases in crime, and we are just not experiencing that.
Can you give us some examples of Part 1 crimes?
Sure. It includes basically all the persons crimes and then a couple of the, so for instance, homicide, rapes, burglaries, robberies, things of that nature. I can go through the
domestic abuse.
I'm sorry?
Domestic abuse.
That would be a Part 1 crime as well, yes.
That's good. Thank you.
Sorry. In addition to our Part 1 crime dropping, we've also seen a pretty good reduction in traffic accidents. The first number up there is just reportable accident. That's basically a property damage collision that meets a state threshold but doesn't result in any injury or death. So we've seen a 25% reduction in those. The second one, of course, represents a 25% reduction in fatal injury crashes. And then I thought I'd put this next number up there because we hear oftentimes about the ped bike safety and things of that nature. And so over the past year, we've experienced a 60% reduction in vehicle versus bicycle collisions.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we're going to just ask questions because I'll forget as you move forward.
You bet.
Can you just kind of, off the top of your head, where are the major high traffic accident areas in town?
Well, there's a map and 2 slides that I can show you if you'd
okay.
like, and we'll talk about each of those. So
Okay.
it changes, historically we can look, so we look at our information in aggregate. We'll look at it over an entire year span, and then we break it down into a month span, and then we also break it down into the past week, what's occurred, and then we deploy our resources accordingly. So for instance, our traffic division will take a look and say, over the past year, our highest incident of crashes have been 95 in Appleway. And so they spend a portion of their time there, but they also have to balance that with the number of traffic complaints we get, and then also kind of depending on the time of year. So for instance, when school kicks off historically, we'll do an extra focus on pedestrian safety and bicycle safety for the children that are going to school. Things of that nature. Right before winter kicks off, we'll do a little focus on winter driving and things of that nature. I would tell you that there is a portion of what we do that's based on complaints. So we have someone who says that there's always speeders on our streets. It goes into a matrix that we put together, and we track those things. And so we track the amount of time that we spend out there. Sometimes we'll put out some equipment that will measure the speeds and the volume of traffic, and then to figure out if there really is a problem, and if so, then we'll deploy our resources accordingly.
See, while we're on that area, on the reduction of the vehicle and bike, and I remember some point last year when, went into that a bit, and it sounded like a lot of, when it happens, it's not going down the street, but somebody kind of pulling out of the driveway or something. Anything off the top of why that would be down so?
No, we
Sure.
could put together kind of a comprehensive review to figure out why they're down 60%. Our guys look at it kind of anecdotally here from there. Really what we look at, though, is the big increase in spikes. For instance, we'll get, a couple of collisions at an intersection that was not on our radar before, and so we would take a look at that. Or if we hear that, hey, we've had a couple of near misses on this street and this trail or something like that,
Yeah.
then we'll go down there and try to figure out, is it an engineering problem? Is it an enforcement problem? Is there some other environmental thing that we're not considering? Or maybe folks just need some education in that area to say, hey, remember, you got to come to a complete stop here before you do this, or whatever. I don't have that data directly in front of me, although I do have all the stats relating to the traffic itself. Getting into what caused it would take just a bit more time, but I can
Sure.
certainly put that together for you
Oh,
if you'd like.
no, that's fine.
As it says up there, we've had a strong focus on community engagement. I meet with each one of our new officers as they're hired, and I explain to them that before they come to our agency, I want to make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves in for. And so I tell them that our big three focuses are these. I expect them to respond to emergency calls for service, and then we're not doing that when we have some free time. I expect them to do one of two things. Number one is find felons, find the people who are causing us a lot of our problems and, within the community, and solve those problems, or engage in community outreach efforts. It includes talking with people on the streets and the parks and the shopkeepers and things of that nature. And so that's a community focus and community engagement that we're talking about. One of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about just real briefly is a lot of times, and it sounds silly when I say it in my brain, but sometimes police departments are gauged not by what you read or see, but by what you don't hear about in the paper. We have had a whole bunch of very provocative and large incidents in our city, especially for a city of our size. And typically, it's a flash in the pan. There'll be something in the news about it, and then we make an arrest, and then it goes away. We never hear about some major botched investigations or some really highly inappropriate uses of force or things of that because of, frankly, some programs we put together. I want to talk just a little bit about this. We spend a lot of time on proficiency and training of our officers to make sure that they're following best practices, not only to keep our cops safe, but also keep us out of the news and the courtroom. Of the 42,717 calls that I spoke about last year, we had a total of 37 of those that resulted in any sort of use of force. Now remember, there is a large portion of arrests that are going to result in use of force anyway because the bad guys don't want to go to jail, so they run. And our use of force reporting criteria requires that we complete this form whenever anybody is injured, thought to be injured, or we use any type of force against the person. So if I squirt them with OC, I hit them with a taser, I tackle them to the ground, and they might have a minor abrasion, or they go, ow! That immediately results in a use of force report. That occurred 0.084% of all of our calls last year. That's it. What I'm saying is our folks don't resort to the use of force as a first or even a second option. They do it when it's only absolutely necessary and reasonable, and when they do, it's done appropriately.
Madam Chair. Chief, while you're on that subject, first of all, that's very important. It keeps the city out of lawsuits, and it's the right thing to do. Officers shouldn't be using force excessive force when it's not necessary, so I'm glad for that kind of training. But one thing I do recall from having worked at the police department, right when you were hired, you initiated a use of force citizen commission that reviews, because I get asked these questions quite a bit, certainly lately, with what's happened across the nation, what kind of practices we have in place. And you initiated that. Maybe you'd like to talk about it a little bit.
Sure. I believe it was in 2015 we established a Citizen Use of Force Review Board. That board is usually convened when we have something that sits right on the gray area, where we have something that may or may not fall in line with our policies, or maybe policy doesn't allow it, but when the average person looks at it, they go, well, of course you did that. Or the converse is also true, where we look at something and go, man, I don't know if we should have done that, even though policy says that we're allowed to do that. And so we convene those, that board on those more kind of controversial uses of force. And they take a hard look at the case. They get access to, well, we have one of our people come in and show them the videos that are associated with the event, and they get to see the reports and things of that nature. And then ultimately they render a report to me, and we take action from there if necessary.
So it's not really like an ombudsman like you'd see in Washington, but it's awfully close. It's a very fair, impartial board of citizens.
It is. It's made up of citizens, kind of a cross-section of the community. And we have, I don't remember exactly how many people are on the list. Don't hold me to this, but I think it's upwards of 20. And then to give me the board, we typically have 6 of them come in and review a particular case, and we try to rotate them through the process.
I think that's fantastic. Before you move on, I wanted to go back to the strong focus on community engagement, and I have a reason for doing this, Madam Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
My friend Marshall Mend, who I'm going to tell him to watch this meeting, he talks to me all the time about the community engagement. What are the police officers doing? He wanted the police officers to hand out basically cards that said, "I'm your friend." And then if you got pulled over, he would have a card that said, "No, I'm your friend." So we talked a lot about that, how that wouldn't work. But he does have some good ideas about some giveaways that he's working on that I know the department's done in the past. The association's given away little cards for a free pizza to a good driver or a good student, whatever it may be. Some of the community engagement, specifically, the Boys and Girls Clubs, those kind of things I thought you could talk about.
I will. And if you don't mind, I would
Is it
like to
farther
push it.
on?
I have some slides and some photographs of all of that
Absolutely,
stuff.
thank you. Sometimes you don't cheerlead enough for yourself, so I wanted to do that.
Well, it's not me, it's my folks. We have a fantastic group. And really, this is some of the things that we focus on internally. We want to make sure that we are a transparent agency. We are accountable not only to our citizens, but also to each other. And then we exhibit a high degree of professionalism in everything we do. And then I want to touch on this just a little bit. We are known as leaders in law enforcement in the Pacific Northwest. Just a quick aside, we currently have 2 openings within the police department. Last time I looked, we have 37 laterals and over 200 entry-level applicants for those 2 open spots. I'm not aware of another agency in our area that would have that degree of interest in their jobs. I would tell you that this 37 laterals, as to be expected in today's day and age, there are quite a few that come from some of the areas that are experiencing some of the problems, frankly, that we are not experiencing here. That represents a portion of them, but we've also had some great success, and this is going to sound kind of bad when I say it, but stealing the most talented from some of our neighbors. We've got a fantastic group of people that have requested to come work for our agency over the past number of years from some of our surrounding agencies, and we're happy to have them. We've really grown by leaps and bounds. I'm just going to brush through these pretty quickly here. Some of the other things we've done externally anyway is a partnership with the Drug Enforcement Agency and the Idaho State Police for investigating drug crimes. We have a new task force that we put together, I believe it was about 18 months ago now. Our area was just designated as a HIDA area. That's a high-intensity drug trafficking area by the United States government. This was a combined effort between us and the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with Idaho State Police and the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, to get this designation. What that does is it frees up funds to not only for training but also for equipment to combat drug trafficking in our area. We've got a fantastic track record of partnerships with other agencies for some of our major events. When a lot of the other major cities around here weren't experiencing the protests and things of that nature, they came and worked cooperatively with us during that time, and I think very successfully. And then also during some of the critical incidents we've seen, for instance, when Post Falls would have an officer-involved shooting, then our agency would go over, and we were asked to handle not only the SWAT aspect of the incident, but also the officer-involved shooting investigation that followed and any charges that might be applicable for the individual responsible for that event. Sorry.
Madam Chair. Chief, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but we get asked a lot of these kind of questions, and with you here and we're recording this, you can answer a lot of these questions. Backing up just a little bit to the major incidents, particularly the protests downtown, and we had some armed civilians downtown. Some of the things that council gets asked a lot was there a police presence? Now, I know, and council knows, we visited the command center that you had put up. That was very impressive. Had all the other agencies you just talked about were cooperating and working. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the police presence during that time.
There was a significant police presence, not only downtown, but throughout the city. I deployed them differently than they had in many other areas. When you looked at the news and the way that some of these events were being handled, it was my opinion that if you put a line of cops out in front of City Hall, you're probably going to be met with a line of demonstrators in front of City Hall, and that is your new flashpoint. Wherever we were going to put a line of officers to try to engage in, trying to quell something that hadn't become a major event to that point would only cause more community disruption than it would, frankly, try to prevent. And so we deployed our resources differently. There were a lot of officers working that week. We went to basically 12-hour shifts for a long period of time, and so detectives were no longer detecting. They were in uniform, ready to act as I was with everyone else out there if something really went south. But we thought by not having a number of uniforms walking up and down the street and engaging in, frankly, we were targets for a long period of time, and not being out there and visible and maybe engaging in rhetoric with people and that sort of thing, that we were kind of taking the spotlight off of us and allowing the societal issues to just kind of work themselves out. I would tell you that we were 100% prepared for anything had it reached a threshold that we had pre-established in terms of violence or property damage or arson or things of that nature. I'm not sure how much more to say on that, other than our actions during that week and the weeks that followed were purposeful. I would also tell you that we tread lightly here. We respect everyone's constitutional rights, all of them. And if I were to trample on one individual's rights, maybe their right to assemble or free speech or whatever, and then ignore someone else's right to carry by doing something against them, I just have to be very, very careful there. I want to make sure that we're respecting everyone's rights.
And if we could clear up a rumor, if I may. The police department never invited armed individuals to come downtown and stand guard on their behalf.
No, ma'am, we did not.
It was just a matter of they show up, they have the right to be there, and the police department kept the peace. From what I understand, the protesters and the armed individuals actually worked well together. There was not any sort of threatening behavior going on. They respected each other's space, is what I've been told. Maybe you could clarify on that.
There were no crimes that were committed or at least reported to us during that time period. You're right, there were some very respectful interactions from parties and individuals on both sides. I spoke at length with Tyler and some other folks who were out there during the protests and who'd said, hey, they'd see something that was maybe moving towards some behavior that would maybe disrupt the message a little bit. And people on both sides would try to temper that a little bit. I would tell you that might have gone just a little bit different if you had a number of officers in uniform trying to, give out that same message. I'm not sure what else to say about that other than I think, as you said before, there were no laws that were broken. Idaho code allows people to open and conceal carry as long as you don't threaten with a firearm or, more importantly, shoot it off. Then there's not a lot we can do about it.
I appreciate that. I think it was important to speak about that today.
And I think it's really important to stress to the community that you were monitoring the situation extremely closely and very deliberate in your actions.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. We had our command post was open daily As Councilmember Wood just said, we had people from a variety of different agencies involved in our command post. We had intelligence that was coming in, literally changing minute by minute and second by second in some circumstances. We had officers that were not only on the streets that were monitoring it, but we were monitoring it from afar. And in my opinion, I think things went very well. We didn't have a single act of violence that occurred. We didn't have any crimes that were reported to us relating to protests or things of that nature during that intense week and a half.
Thank you.
I wanted to bring this slide up just to give some idea of how we go about tracking our crimes. And I've listed both types in there. The Part 1 crimes are the ones that you just asked about previously, the ag assault, arson, burglary, homicide, rapes, thefts and vehicle thefts, things of that nature. Those are the ones that are really the most provocative, that people really tend to hear about a lot. Most of these on the left include crimes that have a victim associated with them. Part 2 crimes typically do not, but there's a couple on here that frankly they're crimes that we really pay attention to. For instance, the child abuse, the kidnapping, the sex offender violations and sex offenses, things of that nature. We really keep a hard eye on those as well. You can see up here by the graph, and we get this, just so you know, we get this weekly and monthly, and we do a year review of this as well. This was year to date through the end of June. We had we're basically flat for Part 1 crimes right now, and I think a good portion of that is because for about 2 months there, we didn't have our officers engaging in our community outreach or any kind of proactive activity. And our Part 2 crimes, as you can see on the far right, bottom right, they've reduced slightly as well. Then, of course, we also monitor our calls for service and our warrant arrests. Now, really, my whole purpose in telling you all this is to say that I put a lot of stock in the theory that random patrol equals random results. But if you put our folks at the right place at the right time, engaging in the right activities, you see these types of reductions.
It's a question. Mm-hmm. Actually, one that jumps out at me, and it's the largest one in the Part 2. I know we have kind of a reputation for being a hotbed of conspiracy theorists, and I guess that proves it. 250%. What kinds of things make up the category of conspiracy?
Well, okay, so it's probably not like the conspiracy theorists you're talking about there. A conspiracy would typically be two people engaging in some sort of furtherance of criminal behavior. So you and I decide that together we're going to go and we're going to steal a bunch of stuff at store X. And so we enter with the intent of committing a bunch of shoplifting, or as it turns out, it might be burglary in that case. And so those offenders might be charged with conspiracy as well as the shoplifting or the theft or the burglary or something like that. It's not just because someone thinks the world is flat.
And I realize because they're such small numbers, the proportion can jump, but is that a category, if you can remember does it ebb and flow quite a bit, or was this an unusual period of people thinking about it?
There were also some changes with regards to, my understanding is talking with our folks over in detectives with some things they were doing with the prosecutor's office, that was we were having some more of these charges at least be filed and sent over and things of that nature. I would tell you that I don't know if it ebbs and flows, because honestly that's not one that I really track as highly as I do, for instance, the sex offenses or the child abuses on that category. I spend more time, and the drugs. I spend a lot more time on those than I do the conspiracy ones. But we'll ask about these from time to time. Every now and then we'll see a spike, and so for instance we get 4 kids who are out conducting vehicle burglaries, and they'll do 8 or 9 in a night. It just hits us really, really hard. And so we will charge each of those with conspiracy, and so we see a big jump for that week. And as it turns out, I think we had that happen 3 or 4 times just with vehicle burglaries alone over the past couple months. And so that would represent a good portion of the number that you're seeing up there.
Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Chief, on the CompStat, I was hoping you would go into that to a little more detail. I had worked for the police department for 25 years before you came along, in detectives for a long time. Had no idea what CompStat was, what it meant, what it entailed. you came from a large agency and this was routine for you. So maybe you would explain the kind of meetings that CompStat is.
Sure. Well, it begins with just computer statistics. We take a look at the types of crime that are occurring and when and where they're occurring. And we'll not only plot them on maps, but we'll also talk about each of the different crime types. I'm gonna get 2 slides up and then I'll come back to one. So for instance, let me get my little pointer out here. We would take a look at this area right here in particular. This was just from last month, and so it's probably not the best example, but I can still highlight it on this slide right here. See those little dots right there? Those all include vehicle burglaries. And so at the end of the last month, going into May, we would take a look at those and say, what happened? What happened here? Why do we have all these vehicle burglaries? Do we have anyone in custody or whatever? And then we'd also do the same thing the next month, where that group is now gone, but we have a new group up here. Well, did we displace them? What happened to the person responsible for these? Oh, we arrested Bobby X. Bobby X is in jail now for all those vehicle burglaries, and those went away. Okay, well, who's responsible for these? Oh, there's a couple of kids we're looking at, and we just interviewed them yesterday, and things of that nature. It's kind of I guess the direct answer to your question is, it's a blend between using statistics to map crime and put resources in the locations at the times that we're most likely to experience the crime, but it also has a large intelligence-based model behind it. So we'll have people not only from patrol, but also detectives and our crime analysis folks in those meetings, and monthly we get together and figure out what's occurring in the city and how can we improve it. And then what things do we see on the horizon? We know that we're coming into, it's almost shopping season for Christmas, even though we're in the middle of summer. It doesn't feel like it, but we know we're coming up on it. So what programs and things can we put in place to prevent some of the thefts and burglaries and things of that we can experience, or we expect to experience over the next couple months? The patrol folks will tell us, for instance, hey, we're seeing a bunch of, I'm going to get my cursor again. We get a bunch of vehicle burglaries. I'm on the far right there. A bunch of vehicle burglaries in this area, and they all seem to be occurring after 8 p.m. at night. Are patrol folks going up there at night? And if so, what do your activities look like? Are you driving around with your lights on, shining them in the corners? Or are you just driving around dark? Or who you see? Do we have a parolee or someone who just got released that area? Or, those types of questions to get some of the answers as to why we might be experiencing a little spike in that area.
Well, what I noticed about CompStat is, first of all, it's very strategic. It's not reactive. For years and years and years, we were just reacting. And that explains the decrease in crime, the strategy.
Well, remember, we do this monthly, but then we also get a report that comes out weekly. And I would tell you that at every briefing, daily, our folks would bring up this map right here. It's the same one that the average citizen can go on to cityprotect.com currently. It used to be crimereports.com. And you can click on a specific area, a geographic area, or a type of crime, and it will map out what's occurred over the past 24 hours or whatever time period you put in. And so they'll open this up in briefing and say, hey, we've seen not only the briefing report that the sergeants will read to the officers saying, hey, by the way, there's a suspicious car down here, or we're looking for this individual, or so-and-so just got out of jail and he's got another warrant or whatever. But they'll also pull up this map and say, hey, over the past 20 hours, we've seen, or 24 hours, we've seen a bunch of thefts right down in this area right downtown. You two, since this is your area tonight, I would like you to spend some extra time in this area and try to find out who's responsible for it and yada yada. We'll just go into information like that.
Mm-hmm. It's very effective.
I don't know how to do this, but I guess I got to get up. As I said before, this is our Part 1 crimes over the past number of years from 2014 to present. I just thought this was a fantastic illustration of the work that the men and women of your police department are doing out there. To have that dramatic of a decrease in crime over those number of years is absolutely fantastic. And then you asked previously about community engagement, and so here's some of the things that we've been kind of highlighted, although there's many things that are included that aren't going to be up on the slide. We have a crime prevention officer, and she kind of dictates the number of meetings and the things that we go to, and things she'll hear from things about the community, or I will receive information and send it to her, and then we will set up meetings, and then we'll make sure that we have officers present there. We engage with Coffee with the Cop. You spoke before about the Police Athletic League. We had Officer Proctor has really spearheaded that. He's one of our school resource officers. And he took this on and ran with it. And let's see, I think 2 years ago the process started. Last summer was absolutely amazing with the number of kids that we interacted with. We did it not only at the Boys and Girls Club, but also at, I think it was at Ramsey Elementary, and I think there was one other school that we went to and did these programs at. It was hugely successful. I'm sure you've heard us talk about our annual toy drive in the past. This last year, we got $25,000 worth of toys that we distributed to children in need at the hospitals and whatnot. And then in addition to those things, our officers engage in a number of cleanups. They coach off-duty. There's a whole bunch of off-duty volunteer work. I heard a story, I think it was probably 3 weeks ago or so, of a whole squad that knew of an elderly lady that hadn't had her yard cleaned up in some period of time. And so the entire squad went and helped her get that stuff taken care of because her family couldn't. Her family was elsewhere because of the COVID and couldn't come and help, and so the squad went and cleaned up for her. And that's just some examples of some of the things that our officers have done. These pictures are probably my favorite out of all of our community engagement pictures. We have an SRO on the top right, and then the other two are just community engagement pictures. An officer reading to a group of children in the park, and this one is at one of our senior care centers where they just wanted some interact with an officer and learn more about what was going on in the city, their neighborhoods, and things of that nature. This bottom one here is the birthday party. This is one of the pictures of the Police Athletic League. I have a number of other photos of this. This was absolutely fantastic program. But the photos had to be taken at such a wide angle because there were so many kids involved that you couldn't see any of the kids or any of the officers. It was just a bunch of dots, and so it was horrible on the slide, so I took that off. But anyway.
I just want to add that I walk frequently through our community daily. I mean, 2 or 3 times a day. And it is so heartwarming to see the officers in the parks and the kids' eyes light up when they recognize one, or just see an officer and the greeting that they have. And it happens daily, especially during the summer. And it's just so awesome to see. And the passion that your team has for our community is very evident. So thank you for that, and please pass that along. That
I'll absolutely do that.
I'm kind of a silent observer as I walk by, and it just always makes my day.
Well, Councilmember Wood, you asked earlier about I think you said something about a giveaway or from your friend. I would be happy to speak with him. And just so you know, our officers typically carry the stickers and little tattoos that the kids can put on their hands or whatever, and we go through tons and tons of those. But you're right, they love them. The children absolutely love them.
Well, I'm actually going to send him your way. He does have some really good ideas and someone who's probably going to step up with maybe free ice creams. So I told him, I said, you really can't have him carry those around in the car all day. Have to be a gift certificate.
We've done some amazing programs like that in the past. Eric Paul put together a free bicycle helmet program so if an officer saw a child without a helmet, they would pull over and here's a free helmet. Put this on, please. Save your head type of thing.
Yeah.
And then it usually seems like once a year, right around the Christmas time, then you're right, we give gift cards out or something like that to people who we see engaging in really good behavior. We just have to be really careful that we don't inappropriately stop someone just to recognize them for doing something good. It has to be
Right.
during the course and scope of a regular contact or just a consensual, walk up, hey, thank you so much and here's a card and type of thing.
Well, in your signature program, Holidays and Heroes, it's probably on here somewhere, but that's been going on for over 25 years, and it's an amazing thing.
We've continued in that too. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's all the information I have for you.
Well, any further questions?
No,
Covered it, yeah.
I'm very pleased with the presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. Well, that completes our agenda for our General Service Public Works Committee meeting. So we are officially adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.